Good afternoon to all of our viewers. Welcome to Let's Talk. We are delighted to be with you on our YouTube platform this afternoon. We have a very exciting program lined up for you today, and we are going to be discussing HIV. It is an interesting discussion, lots of information to share. We trust that you are ready and waiting. We have with us this afternoon a very special guest. I will introduce her in a while, and waiting for another to join us. But before we go any further, let's just have a word of prayer. Almighty Father and our God, we pray that you will be with us as we share on our Let's Talk program today, as we discuss this very important subject of HIV. We pray that you will guide our discussions, be with our viewers, and grant that the information we provide will prove meaningful. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So to our viewers, we want to just welcome you to Let's Talk. Today, we are discussing the subject of HIV and AIDS and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We have with us right now two guests, one joining, one is on already. And so I want to welcome our participants this afternoon. First, I want to introduce to you Miss Delcora Williams. Miss Delcora Williams is the AIDS Program Manager for Antigua Barbuda. And Miss Williams, I'm just going to ask you to greet the viewers and just say hello.
Good afternoon, President Greene. Good afternoon, Mr. Reid. Good afternoon to our listening public. It's a pleasure for me to be here.
We also have another guest, delighted that he's able to join with us today. His name is Ainsley Reid. I am going to ask him to just greet the folks. Ainsley Reid, as you saw, is a community activist. He is a big campaigner for persons living with AIDS, and we are delighted to have him with us this afternoon. Mr. Reid, welcome. It is our delight to have you on Let's Talk.
Thank you, Dr. Greene. Good afternoon, Delcora. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Audience, I think this is not just Caribbean audience, I think it's international audience. So good afternoon, everybody.
Okay, so we are here today to discuss this very important subject of HIV, AIDS, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And first, I want to ask Ms. Williams. Ms. Williams, why is this a relevant discussion? There are lots of people, HIV rather, has been around for a while, and over recent times, some folks have even forgotten about it. I have not had a recent discussion on it. So is it relevant and why?
It is very relevant. I always say, when I go to speak at churches, I always tell them, HIV doesn't wipe its foot at the entrance of the door and turn around. Instead of that, it comes right in and it worship with us. And it is, you can't say, well, HIV is not welcome here, because most of the time we can't look at somebody and say that person is HIV positive or not. And so it is very relevant. The fact is that just as everybody, all of us need a Lord, whether you're HIV positive, whether you have diabetes, whether you have high blood pressure, and therefore we too, persons with HIV, will be with us. They are supposed to be feel welcome to be here, because they have the same rights and responsibilities just like everybody else. And so it is very important that this discussion is always there, because we want everybody to understand that HIV is not, it's not a death sentence. It's not, hi, I have HIV and I'm dying, that kind of way anymore. I have persons that have lived 30 years plus with HIV and is doing very well. And so I think the discussion is always welcome.
Well, before we go any further, maybe I should ask you to, just for the benefit of somebody whom we never should assume anything, for the benefit of anybody who is viewing at this time and may not quite understand what HIV is and also the difference between HIV and AIDS. So if you can just give an explanation to that before we move any further.
Well, HIV is an acronym. It stands for Human Immunodeficiency Syndrome. A person can test HIV positive, and you will not be able to say, okay, that person has HIV unless they declare that they're HIV positive. Additionally, for AIDS now, AIDS is acquired immune deficiency syndrome. And what that means is that a person has certain signs and symptoms that will tell you, okay, this person is HIV positive, and now they have the signs and symptoms of the disease. So that usually we say the person has lost like 1/3 of their body weight. They might have oral thrush. They might have other opportunistic infections such as tuberculosis, pneumonia, and so on. They are easy they're susceptible to certain infections. You understand? So the HIV and AIDS, nowadays we try and make sure we say HIV and AIDS because we do not want you to be saying that person has AIDS. That person, as long as they do not have the signs and symptoms that WHO describes, that person just has HIV, and they can live healthily, long, a well, good, productive life being HIV positive because they just have a disease. You know, they're just living with a disease, but it's they can live happily and healthily with that infection.
Okay, that is useful information. I remember that when we began to talk about HIV, that people were very scared and wondered how should they relate to persons who are positive. I want to bring on Mr. Reid at this time. Mr. Reid, you have done some significant work in terms of advocating for HIV and the acceptance of individuals. So if you can just speak briefly to the issue of perhaps we may say stigmatization and why this is important.
So, a follow-up to what Ms. Williams said earlier, she spoke about the importance of treatment, but there are, I would say, three major aspects to living with HIV. One is getting the test done. So if you get the test done and you find out that you are...
Okay, Mr. Reid, your volume seems to be a little low. It's going and coming. If you can put your mic a little closer to your mouth, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Are you hearing me better now?
Yeah, that's great.
Perfect. So there's there are three important parts to this issue, based from my perspective. One is it has to be the test, because without the test, you won't know that you're HIV positive. You get the test done, you find out that you're HIV positive, and you get into care. Once you get into care, there are other tests that are going to be done, and they may consider encouraging you to start treatment. And so the next part of it is living, taking the medication and so on. But also the issue of disclosure is a major challenge for many people living with HIV. One, because the moment you start saying that you're HIV positive, you start wondering about your sexual orientation, start asking questions about how many people you had sex with, and so on. So many people choose not to disclose their HIV status because it raises so many other issues in the minds of other persons. So the moment you disclose, there may also be the issue of stigma and discrimination.
Okay, Mr. Reid, sorry to interrupt you again. I'm getting some of our viewers are saying they're still not hearing you. So I don't know if it is possible for you to, what should I say? Just use
okay. Let me
use your mic. Yes, use the computer mic.
That's right.
Oh, but it's gone to now.
Okay, let's hear you now.
Okay. Make sure the volume is up.
Yes, go ahead. Let's hear you now.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, awesome. So it was that mic. So, like I was saying, one, the importance of testing, getting the test done. Once you get the test done, then you will be told whether you're positive or negative. If you're positive, they may put you on treatment. They may also do other tests, just to improve on your care. When the other important thing is the matter of disclosure. So many people living with HIV sometimes choose not to disclose because upon disclosing, many questions seem to surface. One of those questions that seem to surface is the matter of your orientation, how many people you had sex with, what kind of sex give you HIV and so on. And so, those are important things. But a major challenge that we people living with HIV have is how we respond to stigma and discrimination. And stigma is how people just think of you in a very negative way. And so that negative way may cause people to start act negatively, right? So the stigma is in the mind of the person who is stigmatizing. It's not in the person who's HIV positive. And that is why I keep telling people living with HIV that don't worry about stigma, because you should not have a stigma problem, because the problem is the other people. And so when people act on their stigmatizing thought, then we call that discrimination. But many people living with HIV also suffer from self-stigma. Self-stigma because of how we think people are going to treat us, and sometimes how we experience treatment in the past cause us to think negatively about ourselves.
Okay. Now, Mr. Reid, you just said now that there is this matter of self-stigma, where some individuals believe that, well, people may think funny about me, and hence that creates some kind of psychological effect on those individuals. Would you therefore tell folks, if you happen to be HIV positive, that you don't need to do that? You can now, in the context of the Seventh Adventist Church, we are supposed to be a God-fearing, loving people. I see you smiling. I'm not sure why, but we should be embracing one another, shouldn't we? And so in that context, a person who is HIV positive and wondering, how will the church accept me? Well, the fact that we're discussing it this afternoon is an indication that the church wants to make an effort to educate individuals, but you may want to say something else on that.
Yeah, I think the church has a major role to play in the HIV response. One, because upon diagnosis, the first thing you think of, I need to look up with God, because now, and many of us, upon getting the diagnosis, start wondering, am I going to die tomorrow? What is going to happen to me and my children and so on? So many of us run to church. So we go to church, and if we're baptized one time before, we seek to get another baptism because now HIV tell us you're unclean. And so many of us want to baptize another time, and we want to take communion, and we want to regularize ourselves in church and so on. I think, upon that kind of situation, the church has to build itself, or the church should be a supportive and an enabling environment for the HIV positive person and their families, right? So we shouldn't be shunned from taking the communion, because HIV can't jump in the cup and in the
and infect anybody.
Yes, it can't infect anybody like that. It's important to also know that you can get HIV from baptizing after or before somebody living with HIV. So you should not be worried about that. And two people living with HIV, or two people who might have mixed diagnosis, one negative, one positive, can get married, and live together as man and wife. There are two important things I want to raise in that. One, I encourage persons like myself, if you're going to have sex, use a condom, because transmission can take place. But also treatment, and this is very important stage in the HIV response. If you're on treatment long enough, then you will become virally suppressed, meaning that your HIV levels are so low that it may result in some kind of challenging you getting somebody else to become HIV positive. So I think it's important for us to recognize that the church has a key role. So for me to stay on treatment, I may require a kind of spiritual support that my pastor, that my elder, that somebody in the church, someone from health ministry can provide to help me to stay on my meds, right? But also the importance of spirituality, you know, in recognizing that God really loved me, in recognizing that I have not lost my humanity and my dignity simply because I'm HIV positive.
Okay, now I'm going to come back to you in a while, but I want to go back to Miss Williams. Miss Williams, you are the program manager for AIDS and HIV in Antigua Barbuda. Is the disease under control? Is HIV under control? Is it in our region still increasing? Individuals still being affected, because we sometimes don't hear much as we used to hear before. And well, answer that one first, and then I'll have a follow-up.
HIV is, well, we continue to have a very active response, because our response at the moment is to make sure that a lot of persons do not test positive to HIV. So you find during the COVID period when everybody was closed, the National AIDS Program remained open. We not only remained open to ensure that persons have the necessary prevention material, we also continue to give care. We also continue to give support, because we do give a food basket to persons who are unemployed. Now, so I would say that it's under control, but still, persons are still testing positive for HIV. Sometimes when you hear because the reality is, especially young persons, they hear about HIV, but they think they are immune or they cannot get it. And so you still find that we are seeing persons becoming infected. And so because of that, you have to continue giving that message. Look, HIV hasn't gone anywhere. Even though COVID is there, you can get COVID and get HIV at the same time. And so, yes, it's under control in the fact that we continue to test. We are not seeing the large numbers as we did in years prior. Antigua peaked in 2008 with 78 cases. Since then, we have been like less than 30, sometimes 40 in a year. But still, it can be much better. But in order for it to be better, persons have to understand that they are responsible for making sure that they never get a positive HIV test. A person has to respond. We have to understand, that HIV is still there. And if they do not follow the ABCs of HIV prevention, then they are most likely to contract it. And persons do continue to contract it, not at the large volume that we used to have before, but still, persons still are testing HIV positive.
Is there any particular age group that seem to be more vulnerable or at risk?
Usually, over the past, the previous years, we used to have our HIV positive groups used to be within the age group of like 30 to 44, when you're most productive. About 2 or 3 years ago, we noticed that we had like a little switch where we were seeing older persons becoming HIV positive. You understand, in Antigua and Barbuda. And so what we started to do is that we started to like visit churches more often, visit the different religious organizations that they have, the different clubs, the different adults groups, to tell them, look, not because now you cannot get pregnant or, mean that you cannot contract HIV. And so you find that over the past couple of years, we have kind of, well, I won't say switch our focus, but we have included persons that are 50 plus, because we are seeing an increase in that age group.
Now that's very interesting. That the 50 plus age group is the one that seemed to be more active now. But Seventh-day Adventists are supposed to be moral, God-fearing individuals who live virtuous lives. I know that, of course, there are some confidential matters, but from your perspective, what would you say to people in the Seventh Adventist Church? We also do aggressive evangelism, and so of necessity, individuals come in the church all the time. So if I'm a Seventh Adventist, I am dating someone, I'm discussing marriage. What are some things that I need to be concerned about?
You know, I want to go back to Ainsley. When Ainsley started the program, he spoke about the fact that you test positive. The first thing you're going to do is turn your life back over to Christ, and you're going to come into the church, and you're going to now try to be, as we say, quote unquote, normal. If you were a man who has sex with men, all of you become straight because you're trying to say, okay, God, don't punish me. I want this whole thing I want to see the back of it. So, you know, if you were, let's say, sex worker, you know, become a nice young lady, that kind of a way, because you're trying to bargain with God. The reality is that HIV will come in at any time into the church. That is why sometimes the PANCAP and so on will have training for pastors, because they realize that is a reality. Now, the thing is that we are seeing persons who are discordant. One partner is positive, one is negative. It's required that when somebody, you know, you're doing your pre-marriage counseling and so on, I think it's very important that if the persons have not tested and both of them haven't known each other's status, I think the pastor should counsel both parties and, you know, make them not the first trust. You know, you are saying, I love this person. It starts with trust. Can I trust that person to tell them that I'm HIV positive? Can I trust that person? Well, if you can't, you cannot go that far where both of you go, have an HIV test, share your results, and then you will be able to make decision in regards to where do we go from here. You understand? Because the thing is that we as Adventists, you know, I'm Adventist too. We teach the whole thing about not having sex outside of marriage, that we're supposed to we should supposed to practice abstinence until that time. But in reality, we are not. You understand? So therefore, we have to now look at making sure that everybody understand, look, it doesn't matter how that person look. It doesn't matter how I look. I could be HIV positive. Because to tell the truth, my patients look very good. You understand me? We get very discouraged if we see one of our patients looking ill. You understand? So our clinical care coordinator is a dermatologist, which means you're going to hardly tell if my patients are sick. And so therefore it means that you have to do the ABCs. You abstain until you're married. If you can't abstain until you're married, you need to do behavioral change where you stick to one partner, both of you get tested and you stick together. Or 3, you use a condom properly. Now, sometimes we get a little bit confused and we like to say, oh, the person look good, the person look whatever. HIV didn't have a look. It doesn't have a look. And so you have to remember that it's you having sex with a person, unprotected sex. It doesn't jump out of the sky. Unprotected sex with somebody who is infected with the disease. And so therefore it is up to you. People like to blame persons. I'm going to shut up now. People like to blame persons when they test HIV positive. Oh, she didn't tell me anything, or he didn't tell me anything. It's your responsibility to remain HIV negative. You understand? So if you stick according to the church principle, okay, I'm going to abstain. It's very important because you can abstain from now until next year. If that person doesn't get tested, if you don't know that person's status, when you start having sex with a person, even though they're your husband, your wife, your whatever, and you never got a test done, you're still going to contract HIV.
Okay, that is a very interesting observation. And when I am counseling persons for marriage, one of the requirements is that they must get an HIV test. I do not care whether they tell me they're Christians or not. I believe when it comes to health, we don't want to take chances. I want to shift back to Ainsley a little bit, because now we're saying that individuals are now in the church. Perhaps a person becomes a Seventh Adventist after living a particular lifestyle. They're now in the church, and they may not know their status or discover that they are HIV positive. So you discover you're HIV positive. Does that mean? And I think I hear Ainsley. Ainsley, I met you many years ago. I can't remember how long ago, but I know that at one time we were having a HIV conference at Courtsland Hotel in Antigua. You were there presenting. I believe I met you on several other occasions, but recently, last year, I believe I was at a PANCAP event in Jamaica, and you shared briefly there. I was very moved by your testimony. With respect to persons living with HIV and the fact that they do not have to accept a death sentence. Can you speak to that? Because there may be, as you indicated, there may be lots of folks in the church who are secretive about their status because they don't want anybody to know, but they may also be fearful. So can you just share a bit with respect to offering hope to individuals who may be positive at this time?
I think it's important for any person who's alive to get HIV, get tested for HIV. There should be nobody in church, there should be nobody anywhere who has never or who is not considering and who are not taking steps to get tested for HIV. Because the earlier you get the test, and if you're diagnosed HIV positive, then you can get on treatment. The possibility of treatment is there. And so I encourage persons to get the test, get into care. I know Sister Williams, Sister Williams, no, right? Sister Williams.
Yes.
Talk about care. Care is multidisciplinary. So it's not just you go and see a doctor or the nurse. You may see, depending on where you are and depending on the resources in your HIV, national HIV program, you may have the psychologist, you may have the social worker, you may have the case manager, you may have other persons, the dentist, the mental health persons. You know, you may have those persons, you know, working alongside each other to improve your health outcome. And I think it's important to note that even if your faith is something else, right? It is important that you know, avail yourself of all the resources that are there in the multidisciplinary care program. I think also that there are so many options in terms of treatment. I was diagnosed in 1992, on the 22nd of March, 1992. And, you know, I should tell you, I'm 55 years old. So I'm not young, but my life, the quality of my life has improved significantly because if I'm experiencing a downtime, and I think as you live with HIV, like any other thing else, even poverty makes you stress, you know? So with your HIV, there may be instances when you feel very depressed, very stressed, you may feel, you know, alone. And so it is important for you to access those services. I think it's important also to deal with trauma. Many people upon diagnosis, other issues get magnified. If you had a bad relationship with your father, it will get bigger because you may start thinking, no, if daddy was out here all along, this would not have happened. If mommy did treat me a particular way, this would not have happened. So we start looking at people to blame even for the overall diagnosis. So it is important for us to get into care, to get help with those issues, right? Importantly also, if you could join with a support group to listen to the experience of other persons living with HIV. Sometimes, you know, just by listening to somebody else, you may hear a story that may help you to deal with a matter that is affecting you long time. So I think it's important to, as you consider improving the quality of your life, that you look at availing yourself for the treatment and care. I think though, as you get on the medication, you have to have good time management. You have to take your medication every day. My medicines, they are my best friends, right? They are what keep me alive in addition to my faith. And I want to talk a little bit more about my prayer life. This week we talk about, prayer in church, in our Sabbath school classes. And I think it's important for us to recognize that part of achieving a good quality of life is your spirituality, adhering to your faith, praying, recognizing that God plays an important role in how you live every day. Very important. And so I really believe that the other thing that you need to deal with is to accept yourself. Upon diagnosis, it doesn't matter how sinful you were before diagnosis. Whatever your sexual orientation, your sexual practices were, you have to learn to accept yourself and recognize that you're still a child of God. And your life not done yet. Your life still can live a beautiful life. I think you can get married if you want. You can cohabit with other people. Whatever you want to do, you still have the opportunity to do it. But I want to encourage you. Make sure that your faith is strong because so many things are going to test you. When you hear people talk about, your orientation, your diagnosis, your relationships, people are going to talk. But don't watch what people say. Watch what Jesus said.
Amen.
Let me ask you, you just indicated that you were diagnosed in 1992. My rough calculation tells me that that's approximately 28 years ago.
Yeah.
So you're living with HIV for 28 years now. I happen to know that you're married, and to the best of my knowledge, having a meaningful life. When you were first diagnosed, and we do have a number of questions that folks are asking, so we want to rush to them. But before that, when you were first diagnosed, the discovery that you were HIV positive, what did that do to you back then? I know it's 28 years ago, but I don't know if you can remember.
I will never forget. I will never forget. I normally say to my audience in that time, it was such a rough time. And I want to tell you a little story. I might have said this story to you in the past too. I remember I got the diagnosis and I disclosed to this lady and she said, all right, so we can get married. And we got married. And I should tell you, the more I think about the risk that I'm causing this person to, I'm putting this person in, I could not have an erection. I could not have an erection. It's strange. I have to say, that one day I was so desperate. I was so desperate and frustrated that I took my Bible and I put my penis in it and look it up and pray. And I pray and I pray and I pray. And let me tell you, nothing happened. No erection, nothing happened. But over time, as I get to understand that I have to work on me, I have to work on me. I have to talk with the other person about the risk because they need to understand the risk that they are getting themselves into as well. And to recognize that the use of condom minimize that risk significantly to the extent where we can both enjoy sex and so on. The other important part of that early phase is that one, I had to focus on my diet. And I, did some crazy things because treatment was not available in that time. There was no treatment. So I tried all kind of things. And I maintained my vegetarian lifestyle and so on in that time. I have to tell you though, that I experienced violence many times because of my diagnosis, because I keep speaking out in the media, in Jamaica and so on. Many people knew that I was HIV positive and I was attacked. I was attacked one day in Tree. I was attacked again in New Kingston. I mean, I give God thanks for just allowing me to live to see even this time, 28 years later. But the strange thing is, those persons who attacked me, they died. They died. One died from violence, gun violence. Another one died from HIV too. So I think when we talk about living with HIV. HIV don't have no preference. It don't look out for certain kind of people, certain kind of orientation.
Right.
It don't look out for certain kinds of women. It don't look out for people who don't have the money or people who have money. HIV look for persons who practice unprotected sex. Yeah. So if you are having unprotected sex, you are at risk of getting HIV. So it is very important for you to recognize that how HIV spread is by unprotected sex with an infected person. And so the person may not tell you, the person might not even know that they are HIV positive. So it's important for us to have, I want to commend this South Leeward Island Conference for having this meeting.
Okay, I am not sure what happened there, but it looked like we had a little break in our transmission, brother Ainsley. So if you could just repeat what you said the last minute, that would help.
Okay. So what was the last part you heard, Pastor?
The need, if you are practicing unprotected sex.
Yes, if you're practicing unprotected sex, then you are at risk of getting HIV, right? So the risk to get HIV may be decreased with condom use, right? It may decrease. It may decrease with condom. But I think also that if the person disclosed to you that they are HIV positive, you need to use a condom. If you're having sex and don't know the HIV status of the other person, you need to either use a condom or don't have no sex. You have to, in order to protect yourself, you're either going to use a condom, you're either going to have to use a condom or postpone having sex, right? So those are the two things. I also want to say that I commend the South Leeward Conference of Seventh-day Adventist Churches for doing this kind of discussion. Why? Because it will allow for more people to go and do more research about sexuality, because we talk about issues of sexuality earlier. We need to look also at what support groups exist in the OACS and where people can get access to these support groups, intervention, so that they can experience support from other persons living with HIV and from competent healthcare providers.
I do want us to take a few of the questions. Our time is going very quickly, and so there are a few questions here that either of you can answer. Ms. Williams, this one sounds like it's for you. Do we still have a significant number of persons contracting HIV from intravenous drug use?
I can only speak for Antigua and Barbuda. Intravenous drug use is not something that is very, what should I say? A lot of persons here don't use intravenous drugs. And so we do not have that large percentage of persons becoming HIV positive from intravenous drug use. What we have is more persons becoming HIV positive from having unprotected sex with a person who is HIV positive. So when we take history, that is mostly what we have. And it's something that is really, it occurs mostly within the OECS, is that injection drug use is not that much of a problem. It's more unprotected sexual intercourse with a person who is HIV positive that is driving our epidemic. Even we also don't have it via blood transfusion, because the same thing, all our blood are tested for HIV, along with hepatitis and other diseases, syphilis and all those. So,
okay, another question here. Someone is asking, if I'm a virgin living a virtuous life, why should I get tested? I think Ainsley said everybody should get tested. So this person is saying, I'm a virgin, I'm living a virtuous life. Why should I get tested?
Okay, I think that testing is not only to find out if you're HIV positive, but it also provides a baseline. You can say, as of, if I get tested and I get the result today, you can say that as of this date, I am HIV negative. But without that, you don't have any baseline on which to measure your dad, whether you are positive or negative. You have nothing to measure, right? Many persons, by virtue of saying, I have never had sex, believe that they are negative. But you can get HIV from intravenous drug use, like the person asked earlier, right?
Yes.
And some people believe that by virgin mean you don't have penetrative sex.
Sex, right?
But many people have oral sex, many people have anal sex, many people have all kinds of sex. And so they may think that the risk is low when what it requires is for you to come in contact with an infected person's body fluid, like semen, blood, vaginal fluid, or breast milk.
Also, Ainsley, I know some young ladies, they still have their virginity, but has anal sex, and they're still virgins.
Yes.
But do not understand that having anal sex put them even more at risk for HIV, because it wasn't made to open from the outside in, but from the inside out, and so it becomes torn, and then it's exposed to the virus, whether it was in the semen or whatever, and that person will actually be HIV positive. I don't understand, but I'm a virgin.
Right.
Furthest from the truth. People think virginity has to do with your vagina and not the anus.
Yes.
Okay, someone is asking, how about mother-to-child transmission? Let me just take a look at that question again. How about mother-to-child transmission? Do we still have any numbers of that type of transmission in Antigua Barbuda?
Well, in Antigua and Barbuda, we have been validated and revalidated as having eliminated the transmission of mother-to-child transmission by WHO. This is because we have a very good program. Yes, we have women that are still HIV positive, still getting pregnant. We have persons that find out that they are HIV positive during pregnancy, but because there's availability of medication to prevent the transmission, so long as the mommy takes the medication, then we have not had any babies being born positive for mothers that are in care and treatment. Now, the thing is also within the Ministry of Health, we also give the mom formula. So a mother who is HIV positive gets free formula until the baby comes off of formula about 6 months. And so in Antigua and Barbuda, we have been able to make sure that our babies are not born positive. Yes, we have some parents that do not really adhere to the advice given. And so we occasionally have like one baby popping up positive due to the mom not being as adherent as she should, or the mom suspecting that she's HIV positive will only come when it's time for delivery. We still have those occasions, but I can tell you that our mother-to-child transmission program is one of the success in the Caribbean.
Okay, very well. Here's another question. This is interesting. Isn't it a dangerous lifestyle if you choose to marry someone with HIV and you're not? Seems like playing with fire, knowing someone someday you will get burned.
I want to say, if you allow me, my wife is not HIV positive, and she's not HIV positive simply because we have done things that would not expose her to HIV. And I think it is one of the good things that are happening in the Caribbean. One, because more persons are getting, and this also cuts the rate of transmission. Once people get on treatment, it reduces the possibility of onward transmission. And so it is a best practice in health where more persons, by getting more persons on treatment, we're doing a good thing for the country.
Yeah.
So in terms of marriage, I think the HIV test should be an important part in the premarital counseling. If disclosure needs to happen in the premarital counseling session, it needs to happen so that more persons understand the risks that they are getting in.
Okay. In addition to what Ainsley has said, right now, there is something which we call PrEP. This is where the person whose partner, when you have a discordant couple, the person who is HIV negative in the partnership can go on ARVs, right? Antiretroviral medication that will prevent them from contracting the disease from their partner. Especially, we encourage couples who would like to have children to do that. So being HIV positive doesn't mean you can't have a child and still be HIV negative. When the couple is ready to have a child, all what they do, they know they have to be on the doctor's care. Doctor will ensure that the partner that is positive has a very low viral load that they cannot transmit the infection. Additionally, they will start the negative partner on ARVs, and that person would be, so they can have children safely. They can also, the person can also take medication like their partner to prevent themselves from getting infected, which is called PrEP. Now, the thing is, you're talking about fire, like it's such a bad thing. But the thing is, we will still go out there and have unprotected sex with somebody and end up with HIV. And that person will be in that marriage forever. Because I have had friends that have, persons that have tested positive, have been married until some of the couples, one of the partner have died and all kind of things, and still they lived a happy married life without the other partner becoming HIV positive. Any one of us can contract HIV. So being in a marriage with somebody that is HIV positive, it's not the worst that can happen. The worst that can happen is you who are out there who are not married, going out there and having unprotected sex, especially sometimes with somebody that you just meet at a party, or somebody you just meet at church. You see the brother, he looks good, or some sister that looks fine, and you still end up with HIV. So the partner status, both of you can work at remaining HIV negative.
Okay, now we have shared a lot this afternoon. I want to come back to the principles of the church and the whole matter of the moral guideline that the Bible has given us. Without putting you on the spot, Miss Williams, the fact that we see still in the church every now and then somebody gives birth to a child and they're not married,
right?
Does suggest that individuals still do have unprotected sex.
Yes.
Which is unfortunate.
Yes.
Because as Christians, we that A in your ABC called abstinence.
Abstinence
should guide us. And when you get married, then you're faithful to your spouse. So that's another step. But it does appear that people do operate outside of those perimeters.
Yes.
And we have already said that because of our aggressive evangelism, it's always possible that we are baptizing individuals who may be HIV positive, and so one needs to take caution. But from your perspective as an individual who is directly involved in the fight against HIV and AIDS, do you see, generally speaking, a tendency for individuals to be ignoring the counsel, to be living carelessly, and is this also so from your experience in the church?
Yes, as you said, right, you still see persons getting pregnant. You cannot hide a pregnancy much. You see young ladies getting pregnant in the church. You will see some of our gentlemen having children outside. So that's telling you they're having unprotected sex. You understand me? They are. You will hear about marriages in the church breaking up because one partner has been unfaithful. And with every one of those incidents, there is some measure of unprotected sex. And so it will always be in the church unless we live according to God's standard, which means we wait until we get married, and then we, have our children and whatever and procreate, as Jesus said, as the Bible said. Now, the thing is that, as we said earlier on, it's advisable that you always have an HIV test, one. Yes, we would like to teach the whole thing about abstinence until you're married, but the reality is it's not happening. So what do we advise, and what do I advise as the person who is responsible for HIV and AIDS in Antigua? If you know you cannot abstain, please use a condom. Because sometimes people say, oh, I am abstaining. And as soon as somebody touches them on the leg, they're gone. Abstinence means that you're not going, no matter how much touch, no matter how much whatever, you're not going to engage in sexual intercourse, then you can do that. But for those of us who are weak, who are sinful, who knows that we have a weakness, please protect yourself, get to know the status of your partner, know your HIV status too. Please remember, if you have an HIV test and that result is not the final result. I think it's very important that we understand that. Some of us will go and have an HIV test and say, oh, I'm negative, and that's it. Think that is immune. No. The thing is that you can test negative today, and if you haven't passed the window period, you can be still HIV positive, and when you test in 6 months' time, you get a positive result. So please do not just go and have a test with somebody and then say that you're HIV negative. It requires you to have a succession of HIV results. So please, Adventists, live as Adventists should.
We do have a lot more to say, but our time has just about gone. There is a question here. Should we promote, this is interesting, should we promote protected sex or abstinence? At what point would we appear to be condoning sexual sin? Now, I think I understand the intent of this question. We are a religious body. We teach abstinence. The question is, should we really promote safe sex, so to speak, as a people of God? Where do we now get to the point where we say, hey, listen, we're condoning sin? So, Miss Williams or Mr. Reid, which of you want?
I want to quickly say the question is being asked with the assumption that everybody is negative. And so it is important for us to keep in mind that the HIV positive person need this condom. And we have all kind of, this is a red one, a flavored one, I think. Here's another one.
Long love.
So it is important for persons to recognize that among us as a body, and that is why the church cannot just say, all right, we're an abstinence only church. You can't do that, because among in the body, you will have the HIV positive person. You will also have the person who is unfaithful to their partner. So on. And so they need to know that in the instance, I would prefer somebody to cheat on their partner and use a condom than to cheat on the partner and don't use nothing at all. And so we also talk in situations like this in a kind of judgmental way, because you find there are many people in church who nobody know about that. They may be selling sex, they may be doing all kind of things. And so what we need to be doing is to continue the empowerment of the church and give the church information that can be applied. Not just educate them because they need to know, but help people to understand that this is how you apply this information. So HIV is not a knowledge sitting in something, HIV is a thing that you need to, HIV information, you need to be able to apply to your life, or else you're going to lose it and become positive.
Okay, let me comment before you
may I just say something?
Just before you, Sister Williams.
Oh, sorry.
I know you're itching to say that. But I'm going back to Ainsley's illustration there. Now, of course, as a church, we would hope that all the members, we already declare that we know that this is not the case. The fact that there are unfaithfulness in marriages and there are pregnancies outside of wedlock, etc. But we would hope that individuals would abide by the moral principles. What I think I hear you saying, Ainsley, is this, that if you are choosing to sin, please take into consideration your partner. I think that's what you're saying, correct?
Yes.
Well, I think it's not just the partner. I'm talking about the individual themselves first.
Well,
you
yes.
need to use a condom to protect you first. By protecting you, you're also protecting a host of other persons, your partner, your wife, or whoever, and also your children, because if they lose you, they lose you. So the important thing is that you are using the condom to protect you from STI, including HIV, and so on. I think it's a very important thing for us to empower our congregations to understand the benefits of using this. And not say to people, listen now, if you have a cheat, use a condom. No. You want people to know if you're going to have sex, consider using a condom. One, because you might not be ready for another child. Two, you might know that your partner is cheating on you. Use a condom. Encourage your partner. If you know that your partner is going out, you're having sex with 2, 3 people, don't rub him up sex, but also encourage him to use a condom. Strongly encourage him to do it.
Ms. Williams, maybe you can add this when you respond. There are some married couples who still have a fear of going into a store, drugstore, wherever, and buying condoms, because they think that if people see them buying condoms, it means that they're having unfaithful, illicit sex. So in your response, add that to it.
Okay. The thing is, right, I believe in Christ. I believe I am deeply rooted in Adventism. But the reality is, and that's what we're dealing with, reality,
yes,
is that we do not live as we preach most of the time. We are not saying that we're not advertising that persons must go and have sex and use a condom. What I am saying is that the possibility is that somebody would have have sex. What we do not want is that us as Adventists bury our head in the sand and think that persons in the church are not having sex. Because if we bury our head in the sand, when we pop our head back up, half of our membership is going to be ill from HIV, because they're going out there without the necessary information and knowledge on how to protect themselves. We're not talking about the single person alone. We're talking about a married person, because we have had where the husband gets sick, he's in hospital, they test him, he's positive. And when they test the wife, she too is positive. How do you say where it came from? You understand? When they're married for icons of years. The reality is it's happening. Take our heads from under the sand and face reality. Additionally, now, in regards to Pastor Greene's question, the National HIV Program offers free condoms. We have them in different sizes, in different flavors, in different brands, in different everything. As I said, during COVID, we were open and we were giving condoms like hot bread, because we know if we do not do that, after COVID, we're going to deal with an outbreak of HIV. People, we're not telling anybody to go there and have sex. But what we're saying, if you have to, do it safely. Protect yourself. Protect your wife that is home with the children. Protect your future generation. We're not telling anybody to go there and have sex. What we're telling you, that if you're not going to live by God's principle, for the Lord's sake, protect yourself. Because I know what the church preaches. I know it preaches abstinence.
Yes.
And go to talk. I talk to the young people about abstinence, but I'm going to throw in protection too. Because I am real. I am not fake.
I remember
have sex.
I remember as we close, because our time is up, but
Long gone.
I remember while I was in university, preparing for ministry, the Van Pelts. Most of us know about Nancy Van Pelt, family life educators, etc. I remember the Van Pelts came to CUC to do a weekend program, and in their presentation one evening, they said, listen, God says that we should not commit adultery, we should not have fornication. And then Nancy Van Pelt said, and if you can't help, protect.
Exactly.
We had a
Well
university
said, President.
professor, I would not call his name, but he became very upset. He said that the church should never say that. So I know that this raises some issues. I want to emphasize that somebody has put in the chat here, and I think it's a useful comment, that this program is not promoting sex, but rather providing information to both married and unmarried members of the church.
Thank you.
So that we can understand how to live responsible lives.
Well said.
We would that everybody would abide by the principles of God and order themselves. I feel as a minister, I feel pain that a woman or a man, a husband and a wife, let me say that, would be innocent and discover that they're HIV positive as a result of the behavior of their spouse.
Yes.
And we are really encouraging faithfulness. We're asking people to be responsible. We're asking people to abide by the principles of God. But if you choose to go and sin, we're also saying, take into consideration that sin itself is dangerous. It's going to cause you to lose your salvation. But the consequences, the HIV, etc., the other sexually transmitted diseases that you can develop in the process should make you think twice.
Well said.
We are out of time, so I'm going to ask you, Ainsley, I wanted to go back to the matter of the stigma issue, but we don't have time for that. So maybe one of these days we will bring you back and we will talk about that personal journey. But I want to give you the opportunity to say a few words in closing to those of our viewers.
Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this program. Thank you, Sister Williams. I didn't know you were Sister Williams. I think it's important for our friends, our church members to understand that one, you cannot tell by looking. You cannot tell by looking at persons to determine who is HIV positive and who is not. But then, if you know the person is HIV positive, you have a responsibility to maintain that person's dignity, to show respect, to show love and compassion, and treat people with grace. I think also it is important to note that you should do what Jesus would do. He would show love, he would assist, he would hold hand, and he would encourage, and do the necessary, to help persons to improve their own quality of life. I think there is so much more for the church to do, though, and I am really encouraged by participating in this event. I think the promotion of prevention, testing and use of condoms, very important. I think the church has an important role to play in reducing stigma and discrimination also, not just by what is happening in the society, but what is happening in church. I think it's important also for church to help persons who might have had traumatic experiences in the past, so that should one become HIV positive, it doesn't heighten how that traumatic experience come back to haunt them again. I think church can also provide support for support groups. Church can also have discourse on I know our church has been doing some of these. And I want to close by saying, with COVID, there is an even more important action for me to take now, and that is to stay out of crowd, stay away from crowd. I normally say to people many, many years ago, the HIV positive person should not stay in crowd. Germ lurk in crowd. Now we are being asked to wear gloves. So it's not just to glove on your penis, meaning the condom, but gloves up the hands. Put on your mask, gloves up, because transmission of another kind is possible. So it is important for us to not just be aware about HIV now, but be more aware about infectious diseases in general, because by so doing, you may also know how to prevent yourself from getting them.
Ms. Williams, any final words?
Well, I would like to just say a special thank you to St. John's Church, because they have been providing food for some of our persons living with HIV. And so I want to say a special thank you to them. I would like to encourage everybody out there to know their HIV status. Yes, the church preaches about abstinence. Please abstain. That way I want to work myself out of a job, which means if nobody's positive, then automatically I have no work to do. And so I would like everyone to please live according to our church principles. Please abstain if you're not married. If you're married, please remain faithful, because we're not teaching about condom use, we're teaching about HIV prevention.
Well, thank you very much. I do want to say that it was indeed a pleasure having you both on this program this afternoon. I especially want to thank Brother Ainsley Reid. I know that being someone who is HIV positive, many other individuals would think twice, 3 times, 4 times before they agree to come and talk publicly about their status. I am sure that others have been encouraged by your testimony and your journey. And we want to say to all of our viewers, the whole matter of living responsibly, Ms. Williams put it nicely there when she gave those words: abide by the principles of the Word of God. We are here not to teach promiscuity. We are here to encourage people to understand that HIV, the primary way, now we can say in the Caribbean, especially, the primary way that HIV is spread is through unprotected sex. And therefore, it is important for us to understand, if you're HIV positive, the only way that you can prevent it is through the use of the condom. If you are married and you're suspicious of your spouse, I want to add another dimension to that, because people do need to get counseling as well. I know that the AIDS program has a counseling dimension. There are many marriages that are in trouble and do need some professional help along that line. But guess what? Next week, we're going to be talking about marriage on this program. We're going to have Dr. Kern Tobias, who is the president of the Caribbean Union. We're going to talk about marriage. We're going to talk about unequally yoked relationships, etc. And moving on from there, we're going to talk about divorce and the issues relating to divorce, and then remarriage after divorce. That's the following week. We want to encourage you all to join us next week at 3 p.m. for another edition of Let's Talk. And do remember, if you're watching today and you did not subscribe, please, before you go off, click that subscribe button. God bless you. Thank you again, Ms. Williams and Mr. Reid, for
You're welcome.
Input this afternoon. And to all of our viewers, God bless you, and do have a wonderful rest of the Sabbath.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Okay.